Hello, human peoples. You're listening to the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. Support us and gain access to great exclusive podcasts like Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and our latest show, Spiel Boys. Head over to patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We do game streaming, movie nights with our patrons every Friday night, and you can even commission your own podcast about anything you want. Literally anything, within reason, and we have to do it. You are quite frankly out of excuses not to go visit patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
You're disappointed. Why are you disappointed?
In myself.
Why? You're doing great.
Aw, thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
My name is David Bell.
And I'm Hana Michels.
And we just watched
Heathers.
Nice, we did it at the same time. Twinsies.
Aww. Heather Chandler, Heather McNamara, Heather Duke, Veronica Sawyer.
Why are you such a mega brat? Because I can be.
The most powerful clique at Westerberg.
God, Veronica. Drool much?
Most people would die to get into it.
Heather number one just looked right at me.
I'm worshipped at Westerberg, and I'm only a junior.
Veronica would kill to get out of it.
You were nothing before you met me. You were a Girl Scout cookie.
Why would you run unsure about your name?
If you grow up with an unusual first or last name, you always say it like it's a question mark because people question it enough. Yeah, no, it's just.
So you're not like, that is my name? Like you're not. I mean, unsure.
People have asked me if I'm just Hannah and trying to sound exotic a lot. So I have asked for my birth certificate before. It is in fact
really?
Hana. Yes.
Well, thank you for being on this wonderful episode. This is kind of a bonus episode just because we're coming out of the holiday break. And so this is actually pre-recorded. That's the magic of, I don't know.
Podcasting?
Podcasting. Thank you. That's the industry. Thank you for identifying it. I couldn't. And I thought this would be a fun one because, Hana, you showed me this movie for the first time in my life.
Yes.
Just last year. Before we get into it, I also, do you have anything you want to plug just at the start of this, just to get it out of the way?
Sure. Well, at this point in time, before the new year, it seems like Twitter is maybe dying.
Right.
So on Instagram and TikTok, I am also at HANAMICHELS. And because I don't think anyone else will take that, when I get invited to post, I'll probably be that too.
Right. Yeah, I'm on post. I'm rocking post. There's no one there. It's great. And Hive is now scary. Mastodon, I didn't even try.
Oh, no, I can't.
No. But, yeah, okay. Heathers, a movie I hadn't seen. And I
was shocked by this. I was shocked by this because during all the movie nights, we watched a bunch of, and I understand movie night is partly so we can talk over the movie, so it can't be like a good movie. But, we had watched all of the movies in which Christian Slater's shtick does not work. And you hadn't seen the one in which it does.
His dick works in, I guess we didn't, I was going to say Pump Up the Volume, his dick works, but we haven't watched Pump Up the Volume.
No.
Listen, I think he fucks in Kuffs, honey. I think he technically does. We watched a lot of the shitty ones, Gleaming the Cube.
Yes.
I grew up with Pump Up the Volume. This is a good starting place because Christian Slater, I would argue, plays a great edgelord.
Yes.
A great edgelord.
Yes.
For better, for worse.
And you can see why a teenager or, like a teenage version of yourself would fall for this and why as an adult you would absolutely see the red flags coming out the gate.
Yes, because Christian Slater is always, his entire career has been like his shtick, which I'm not knocking Christian Slater. Like, I grew up on Pump Up the Volume. I know the value of Christian Slater, but his whole shtick was that he kind of speaks like a 50-year-old actor. to the point that he sounded like Jack Nicholson, but also the things he always had that like he's gonna say like adult things that seem adult in his younger career, and that's what made him such a good edgelord. Is that you could really like see how this guy could seem mature and cool when you're young.
And this film is really prescient. There are moments where you realize that it is unintentionally predicting what happens to American schools.
Yes. It also, I would say, it set... I think, I haven't looked into this, but it feels like this movie... When was this made, Heathers? It feels like it was like 87. If Tom was here, he'd be yelling out the answer right now.
It can't be because of the line, bulimia is so 87. So it's got to be 88. Yeah.
It's 88. Winona Ryder, of course, is killing it in this. We'll get to that.
Yeah, but, she's amazing.
It feels before its time where it led to movies like Tragedy Girls or Thoroughbreds. This genre of like, or like Jawbreaker, of like the mean girl high school shit, but like a lot darker.
Yeah.
And when we were watching this, I was saying that I think it also inspired the Harley Quinn show, because what I realized watching this is that young Christian Slater could have played the Joker easily.
Yeah. He would have been great, honestly, because he has that nuance of like seeming. I don't know how to phrase this.
It
seems cool unless you're an adult. You can see why someone would fall for that if they were vulnerable.
Yes. The version of Joker I'm thinking is Joker as a real bad guy, not your Heath Ledgers, more like your Jared Leto's, where it's like, ooh, I legitimately don't like this guy.
Yeah. But you can also, I think what the Jared Leto Joker is missing is that you can't see why someone who is in a vulnerable state would fall for that Joker.
That's true. Yeah.
I think there's a very fine line, and I think this Christian Slater character toes that line.
He absolutely does. This is also, speaking of which, the writer of Batman Returns, which I didn't realize, they also wrote Demolition Man. He also wrote Hudson Hawk, which you haven't seen, and I'm going to have to make you watch it. I don't think you'll like Hudson Hawk. Hudson Hawk, it's also the director of Hudson Hawk, and what I realized is that like Heathers is a very big swing in the way it's made and written.
Yes.
And I think that I didn't look up like how well it did, but boy, this works so much better compared to something like Hudson Hawk. This is like a very dark, and I would argue like a surreal comedy.
Yeah,
it's
very
shot
surreal. The funeral scenes are, even the ones that aren't a dream sequence, they're very surreal. Like the football players getting buried in their football uniforms, because that's all their families see them as. And even there's a moment in, I don't want to spoil it, but
people are listening. We're gonna spoil this movie.
Yeah.
That's just gonna happen.
Well, they the parents think that because of the way that the football players died, that they were gay, and the Christian Slater character makes it actually a good point. He turns to Winona Ryder and says, "How do you think he would act towards a son with a limp wrist and a pulse?" Which, right. I mean, the phrasing is very 80s, but the point, I mean...
Oh, yeah. The point is, it's a big theme of this movie, which also, I feel like John Waters, it reminds me of John Waters a lot.
That might be why I like this movie so much.
Oh, yeah, because it feels like it's shot almost like a John Waters, and it also, it's just dealing with a lot of this, like suburban hypocrisy.
Yes.
Where, like, for people who don't realize, or who are listening to this having not watched Heathers, you should watch Heathers.
Yeah.
And it's about a group...
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, that's John Waters' whole shtick, is his characters can do no wrong unless they are hypocrites, unless they dabble in shame and deception. His characters can do no wrong. So that's kind of his whole thing, is suburban hypocrisy.
Yeah, hypocrisy is like the worst thing in his book. Do you want to actually explain this movie? We don't have to go big into it, but if you want to just do a rundown of the plot, I can also do it.
I think you should do it, because my my brain doesn't do linear.
Sure. So to make it short, this is a film about a group of like mean girls, basically popular girls. They're all named Heather. And then we have Winona Ryder's character, Veronica, and she's like part of this group, and she clearly doesn't want to be. As she says it, I feel like being popular is like a job, is at one point she says. So she's very much unhappy with her situation in this school, which is very much your like typical stereotype high school where the jocks are bullies and, you know, and the cheerleaders are the popular girls, and they're all very vapid. And she meets Christian Slater, who's like the new kid who's very edgy. He whips out a real gun during lunch and fires blanks at the kids. And she finds that very fascinating. The school, I would say unrealistically, doesn't expel him.
Well, this is the 80s. This is before all the school shootings. He's also wearing a black trench coat during the entire... They have a part where someone says, "I can't believe they didn't expel them." Yeah,
I think the movie is cartoonish, and what I mean by that is, it's the adults are depicted as sort of satirical. It's kind of almost a dystopian film.
The adults are very stuck in their routines, in that his dad is like a cartoonish monster, and they have this whole shtick where they call each
Christian
other
Slater's dad.
Yeah,
right?
Christian Slater's dad and son. Whereas Winona Ryder's parents, they repeat themselves on multiple occasions. They repeat the same interactions over and over again. Where the dad's like, "Someone tell me why I do this. Someone tell me why I read these spy novels. Someone tell me why I smoke these darn things." And Winona says, "Because you're an idiot," each time. And then the mother always goes, "You too." And it's just such a cartoon of a suburban family.
Yeah, it's heightened reality. And would you agree that it's kind of a dystopian film, the way something like Brazil is, where it's these characters kind of stuck in a system that is cartoonishly oppressive in this very specific way, where it's not unrealistic.
Yeah, it's hard to see it as dystopian now because it's kind of closer to reality.
For sure.
I would say, but it is dystopian for sure.
It's again heightened reality. Where like, so what starts happening is Christian Slater convinces Winona Ryder to pull a prank on the main Heather, and he seemingly accidentally poisons her. Although it's pretty clear that he does it on purpose.
It becomes clear later, which I think they do a very good job of.
Yeah. But basically what keeps happening is Christian Slater keeps urging Winona Ryder to join him in these pranks that kill the popular kids. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't take too many for her to realize what's happening. But like you could argue part of her knows it and is still allowing it, or is debating it, or doesn't want to realize the truth. But they make it look like suicides. And so what happens is in the school, the staff starts glomming on to suicide awareness, and it becomes this performative activism.
Yes.
Where they're all like trying to one up each other about how concerned they are about suicide, and suicide becomes very vogue in this school. Meanwhile, there's a girl who is picked on. She's overweight and like she's invisible the entire time.
Yeah, she doesn't even have a line until the very end of the movie.
Yeah. Winona Ryder slowly realizes that Christian Slater is a maniac, is a supervillain. He is killing people and he doesn't care. And then he plots at the end to blow up the entire school because his dad is into demolitions, and it turns into like a thriller. She like stops him at the end. And he has kind of a sad ending where like she stops him, she shoots him, he survives. He kind of reveals that he's lonely. I mean, you don't feel bad. It doesn't excuse him, but he's a pathetic person by the end, I would say. Yeah. And he walks out and he blows himself up in front of the school, and she lights her cigarette off of his explosion, which is something he does to her earlier.
Yeah, she burns herself with a cigarette lighter when she realizes that they killed the two jocks, and he lights his cigarette off of her burn.
Yeah. And so like the movie has a lot to say about like who, like in the end, really the only character, because the last thing that happens with Winona Ryder is walking down the hallway, meets the girl who's bullied, who actually has a suicide attempt earlier in the film, and just befriends her, and that's how it ends. And like, I would say the movie at the end is sort of pointing out of like, this is the only person who actually fucking was a pure soul in all of this.
Yeah,
and Winona Ryder is her redemption is kind of realizing that it's not about like vengeance. It's not necessarily about rebellion. The best form of rebellion is to simply like change the tide. She also becomes main Heather.
Yeah.
She takes over that position.
The best form of rebellion is just being a decent person. I think Betty Finn was also kind of depicted as a decent person, but perhaps her obsession with popularity is what makes her less so than Martha Dunstock, who literally doesn't speak. Like, she literally does not get involved in high school because that might be the only way to survive high school as a decent person.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. She really strikes me as the person who is the only person that like I would hang out with as an adult.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot. Man, there's a lot here. We can start from the top a little more, but like I guess I have a question for you, which is, when did you first see this movie?
I first saw it when I was in my early teens, and I rewatched it in my 20s, and the stark difference between the things I noticed in the rewatch and the things I didn't notice in my teens was it was so shocking.
What were your thoughts of it as a teen? I'm very curious about that.
I really enjoyed it, but I enjoyed it on a surface level of just a
like
fun,
a superficial,
dark comedy thriller. Yeah. I think I didn't really notice how much nuance was put into each of these characters and some of the lines. I noticed that more as an adult.
Yeah, it really feels, God, 88. Because I've been trying to think of like, what did they know everything they were doing making this? And it feels like they did. There's even a part where Christian Slater, like, I guess I'm really curious what the filmmakers thought of Christian Slater. Because my read on him, like watching this movie, one of the first things you start thinking is, they're trying to use high school as like an analogy for society, right?
I mean, he even says that. He says people are going to look at this. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that at the end he says that. He says high school is society. But I guess what I'm wondering is that the movie agreeing with him? Or is the movie, is that more edgelord shit? Because it's the edgelord stuff where I'm like it's sort of, this movie, so the way it handles, like we said, that there's a part where, so they kill the first Heather, they poison her, and then the second people are these two jocks, and they're homophobic, they're really mean, and what they do is she promises to have sex with them, I believe, in the park.
Yeah.
And they go, and then Christian Slater tells her that they're using these bullets that aren't going to hurt them or just going to pierce the skin, when the reality is that, yeah, this is absolutely going to kill them, which is where I'm thinking, like, how does she not realize that? Is the idea, do you think she genuinely, like, doesn't realize
I think
that he's...
At this point, she's in denial. There are several periods where she's writing in her diary, I have no control over myself when I'm with him. I think that this is her first experience of infatuation and intense attraction.
Right.
And she is not prepared to handle those feelings. And so she's full on in denial. There's a part of her that knows, and there's a part of her that does not know.
When you saw this as a teen, was Christian Slater attractive? The character, rather?
In the very beginning.
So when he's saying greetings and salutations and all that shit, like that's...
I mean, as an adult, that's disgusting.
All right, yeah. No, that's what I mean. Like, I'm watching Pump Up the Volume. If people haven't seen Pump Up the Volume, I love this era of Christian Slater. He played in Pump Up the... Have you seen Pump Up the Volume?
I already told you no.
Okay, sorry.
Really? No, it's okay. It's just every single day we have an interaction where you ask me if I've seen a movie and I say no.
That's fair. And you haven't seen Hudson Hawk. Pump Up the Volume is Christian. Man, I think you'd really like Pump Up the Volume. So it's about Christian Slater is a boy who moves around a lot. And he's in this new town. And it's in the middle of nowhere. And he becomes a pirate radio DJ. So he's broadcasting unofficially to all the teens in the neighborhood. And he's using a voice changer. And he becomes the voice of a revolution. He embraces masturbation and sexuality and rebellion. And he is a bit of an edgelord. And
so
part
it's
of
a
his
very
arc,
boomer movie.
Yeah, well, part of his arc is that he's a bit of an edgelord. Like he really at one point this kid calls in and sorry, this isn't too much of spoilers, but a kid calls in and says he's contemplating suicide, and Christian Bale uses it to like go off on a rant about suicide, and then finds out the next day the kid killed himself, and realizes like I didn't even tell him not to do it.
You said Bale,
like, I didn't even talk him down. I just used him as like a podium, you know?
Yeah.
So there is like,
and that happens in this movie too.
Yes, that the whole movie is kind of about that.
Yeah, but there's like one of the Heathers calls into a radio show and says she is genuinely feeling suicidal, and they don't take her seriously. And the whole movie is about how adults are not taking these teens seriously, or one aspect of the movie is that they are not taking these teens seriously, and they are in fact kind of reveling in their pain.
Right. Later, the teacher says, like, deciding whether or not to kill yourself is like a serious choice for a young lady or something like that. Oh, it's so good. Yeah. But no, Pump Up the Volume, I guess what I was getting at is that he's basically the less violent version of this character. And watching that growing up, I thought he was the coolest fucking person in the world. And I really want to rewatch that movie now as an adult and see if it holds up. Yeah. Because the whole thing about him in Heathers is that he's not wrong, especially in the way this world is presenting everything around it. He's not wrong that there's something deeply wrong with the situation at the school, right?
Yeah.
It's just that what you realize at the end is that he's just the thing that makes him broken is the same as everybody else, I would argue.
Yeah.
Which is like loneliness and the need for approval.
Yeah. Yeah, and he is absolutely just a carbon copy of his father, who does demolitions for a living and construction, presumably, but we only see the demolitions because that's what he revels in.
Right. His father's a bully. Like, and what it becomes clear is that, like, yeah, it feels like everybody at the school is like a rich kid, right?
A lot of them,
I don't know if that's actually true. Is the circle we're seeing is all rich kids. And they are definitely trying to make this feeling of like this is like society. I mean, all right, was this a style at the time? You would know you wouldn't know any more than me. They all dress like business women and they're playing fucking crochet. And I was like, what the fuck is this?
Croquet. Yeah.
Croquet, sorry.
I don't think croquet was ever popular with high school students. I think that's just another way to scream suburban rich kid.
Right.
I do think shoulder pads were much more universal than they are today.
Right. But yeah, there's this feeling of like networking between them, right?
Yeah.
Where it's the first Heather scene is basically and
that's how I felt going to like a private high school and stuff. And my brother came out of that with such a network, and I came out of that with like no idea how to network and no idea. Like I feel like I wasted my privilege because I don't know how to network, and I feel like most of these kids, they start at that age, if not younger, and it's freaky. It's freaky. It's
I have
upsetting.
a question about that because, and maybe this is part of why Christian Bale is the person I'll get into it, but like Christian Slater moves around a lot.
Yeah.
Is part of it. So he doesn't have this. People listening, I want to know the answer to this because personally, I didn't get anything out of high school. And what I mean by that is I have a few friends that I knew from high school, for sure. My oldest friend, though, who I've known since second grade, I never actually went to school with him for very long. Just like a year, and we went to different schools. And I guess what I'm getting at is that once you hit 30, it really feels like high school, especially, and even college in some cases, not all cases, obviously, like it didn't matter. Like there's a part in this where one of the Heathers says, she's talking about when she calls into the radio station, when she's listing things that's wrong, she says, I'm getting a D or I'm failing math.
Yeah.
And it's very funny to me that would be a problem that anybody could stress out about, you know?
Yeah, but when you're in the moment, that's huge. And all of these adults are stressing that that's your entire future.
And so, like, this pressure to network, like this specific type of high school, like you just said, you went to a private school, you went to a school where, like, this was a thing, more so.
I went to the hippie run version with all the kids who didn't get into the other, like, the college prep private school, so it was less so. I feel like my brother really went to the school where networking was a huge thing, and...
Does he still know? Do you know if he still knows those people?
Yes, some of them, yes. And I feel
that's wild.
I feel like if you go into certain professions and if you don't, I don't want to.
I don't think you're wrong.
If you don't move on in a certain way, then yes, high school is very important.
Part of my.
But for most people, high school does not fucking matter.
Right. I went to a fucking performance arts charter high school. So what I'm realizing is like it's really hard for me to watch these and know how realistic they are in terms of that stuff. Because basically it's like a networking group where they're talking about their futures and their future is tied socially to each other.
You also realize that these are highly gender normative in the 80s. So I think that this type of networking is absolutely useless for those girls.
Right.
It's kind of like the Romy and Michelle popular girl clique in the same exact way. It takes place in the 80s, and one of the girls completely leaves the group to have a career, and the others don't have careers.
Right. It's such an exhausting idea.
Yes.
The high school clique stuff, where I'm like, I can't imagine it. And like, it doesn't feel real to me.
Yes.
And
it doesn't feel real to me either, but I feel like that is how some popular people feel.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think it's just, and I mean, this is a cliche, obviously, the peaking in high school stuff. It just feels like if you really front load your anxieties like that into high school, it's just going to get real dark before it gets better. But again, I'm sure there's people who had a perfectly fine time in high school and came out of it well adjusted. It's hard because all the movies written about high school are written by people like us.
Yes.
And I would say that the people we relate, like, I'm not saying...
I would say that there are some people who toe that line, who are popular because they are genuinely nice and they have creative passions and they happen to be conventionally attractive. But the reason they're popular is because they're super nice. And there are people like that who could end up writing one of these movies. But for the most part, it's people like us.
Yeah, that's the thing. I have this optimistic view of the popular kid. And I think a lot of popular kids in high school, and I experienced this, but again, I went to like a hippie charter school, is actually one of the nicer people. Because to be popular, you have to be liked. You can't be a bully. That doesn't make you popular. Bullies tend to be not so popular, I would argue.
I would say some of this high school trope is... There's definitely a level of condescension that comes with some popular cliques and some popular kids, but I would say some of this trope is definitely projection.
Yeah. So if I had to say what character out of this movie I relate to the most, everybody wants to say they're the, you know her name, the overweight girl who's
Martha.
Doesn't say anything. Martha. Everybody wants to say, I'm Martha. I think, honestly, the character I'm probably the closest to in this age was fucking Christian Slater, sadly. I wasn't a maniac, but I wore a trench coat and I was a real edgelord in high school.
Same.
Of course I was. Yeah.
Same. I mean, I said some things that, looking back, like, I was a fucking asshole. Like, right, I did not understand social nuance or intersectionality or certain things that today, like, I would be humiliated by, never intending to hurt people like Christian Slater, but certainly being an ignorant asshole.
Right. Going back to, like, what this movie, if this movie is self-aware, like, he's the villain at the end, but they don't make him that pathetic, not as much as I wonder if it's that idea of, like, okay, most average high schools, there's no sociopath who's going to blow up the school. But if there were, who would that person be? And they chose the edgy kid.
Yes.
The kid who's like kind of a...
Seems like he's being bullied, but is in fact the bully, which is absolutely right, which is absolutely exactly accurate.
I think so, because the stuff... So... The stuff that we haven't talked about is, like, he's very rapey to Winona Ryder near the end. He starts grabbing her and, like, he's doing, and I think that was intentional. And that's why it's so interesting. We had a tangent before about them shooting the two jocks, and the idea is they make them out to be gay lovers. Is that what they make their suicide note?
Yeah.
And so it becomes this thing where there's a guy, the dad is in there yelling, "I love my dead gay son." And the idea, as you pointed out, Christian Slater says, is like, he wouldn't be so accepting if he was alive.
Yeah.
And that is a very cynical, but I would say accurate portrayal of, like, performative, what would be called performative wokeness today.
I mean, it's an Ohio suburb in 88.
Yeah. And so there's definitely that cynical level to it, that they're trying to point out that Christian Slater is exposing hypocrisy. But of course, in that scene, he says it to her, she laughs, and then she looks over to see the little sister crying.
Yes.
And realizes, like, no, this means something. And so, like,
there's
the movie ultimately...
There's a time and place to say that he has no nuance to him, no sensitivity to him. He may be logically accurate, but he has absolutely no compassion.
And his solution is horrible.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I think in the age of, like, Twitter and stuff, people will often forget, which is, like, people start getting so bogged down with their own side. Like, I always think of when Madison Cawthorn, who is a terrible person.
Yes. I know exactly. Yes.
Yeah. He had those images come out of him in lingerie. And Occupy Democrats was like, look at these pictures. He should resign. And it was like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, he should resign for wearing lingerie? What the fuck are you talking about, Occupy Democrats? It's that where it's like, he's a bad person, but when we get so, like this, when we start getting in that cycle, we just become the bullies.
Yeah, and when we get so bogged down in pointing out hypocrisy without highlighting the fact that that's what we're trying to do, we end up reinforcing the hypocritical belief.
Right. You pointed out when we were watching this, like, the two jocks that get killed when they're on their cow tipping date, the one in the background is, like, forcing himself on the girl, right?
Yeah, and I don't know if that was an actor choice or if that was in the script, but the fact that Winona Ryder and Christian Slater just ride off is like...
Yeah, it makes them shitty people.
Yeah, and she sort of realize, she has an arc in this movie where she, is the one who stops that Heather from committing suicide. And
I genuinely think it was it wasn't improvised. I think that was a choice, because it's exactly what you're saying here, right? It's pointing out that they don't actually give a shit about kindness.
The beginning of the film, she does not give a fuck about other people.
Yeah, that's Veronica's arc. And also, I think this movie draws a very clear line where whenever the movie says if a guy grabs a woman and, like, forces a kiss on her, that's a shitty guy.
Yeah.
And so the moment you start realizing Christian Slater is bad, he starts doing that to her.
Yeah, or if he grabs, a nerd and starts saying homophobic shit, same thing.
Right. And it's a bullying thing. It's consent. It's being shitty. And so, like, that's when you start realizing Christian Slater is a bully as well, because he starts acting that way towards Veronica. He starts becoming possessive.
Yes.
And it works really well, and then to show that, like...
And you realize he was stalking her the whole time which is very much what happens in the arc of an abusive relationship, where you realize previous behaviors were red flags.
Oh yeah, they did such a good job at that.
Yeah.
Because he is, I would say, the equivalent of the manic pixie dream girl trope. Where he, for example, he does a very common 80s thing in this movie. He takes a ladder and he goes through a window.
Right.
And when you're first watching it, the movie wants you to think it's cute.
Right.
And this is why this movie feels ahead of its time, is that it's doing romantic comedy tropes that were seen as cute at the time.
Yes.
So the audience is not necessarily flagging it. You know, today's audience would flag it.
Yeah.
But by the end you realize oh, she can't escape him.
Yes.
He keeps coming in through her window.
Yeah.
That's, I thought, really fucking good.
Yeah. And I think I don't know. I don't think there was an epidemic of school violence at the time. I mean,
I don't know.
Black trench coat aside, that was not an epidemic, and this film treats these suicides like an epidemic. And, Christian Slater even points out the media loves this shit. The media loves when teenagers hurt themselves like this.
There was the satanic panic stuff. They're playing off of the idea that the media absolutely did these teen panics, because it's sort of throughout since the media has existed, policies and shitty beliefs have been funneled through fake concern for kids, right?
Yes, and that's where we get the performative wokeness as well, because performative concern, it is most damaging, I think, when it's centered around children. Think QAnon, who doesn't want to protect kids, but it's never really about that. It's about adults being selfish and using kids for their own agenda.
Right, and I don't think this is specifically about leftist performativeness.
No, it's about everyone. It's about every adult.
Yeah, it's about using concern as a tool, as a weapon.
Yeah.
Basically, for attention, or to push a cause, or to hate a certain group of people. And so again, it feels very. It really does. I keep saying it feels ahead of its time, but I think it's more of just that the realization that people are aware of these things, or have been for a while, you know?
Yeah.
And it depends on who's telling the story, I guess. And the person telling the story seemed to be plugged in to it, which is, again, weird, because they wrote Demolition Man and Hudson Hawk. Demolition Man, so you haven't seen Demolition Man, not. Right? I think you'd find that interesting as a companion piece, because Demolition Man. Now, I'm starting to wonder if Demolition Man was written like this, and then Sylvester Stallone got the script and it turned into an action movie. Because Demolition Man is about. It is also a commentary on a trope. I would say this movie is a commentary on teen comedies.
Yeah,
it's
specifically teen romantic comedies.
Yeah, Demolition Man is kind of that too, which is it starts with a Rambo type. Sylvester Stallone plays this, this guy who's just murdering people left and right. It's Los Angeles in 1998 and everything's on fire. And then he gets frozen because
I have seen Demolition Man.
On him. Wait, what?
I have seen it.
Well, there you go. Yeah. And so when he goes to Los Angeles in the future, it's like a nanny state, and it's very much it feels very libertarian.
Yeah.
Where it's the underground people are the only ones who get to smoke cigarettes and eat meat, and they're led by Dennis Leary, who does a tight 5 on wanting to be allowed to do stuff. So it's just interesting seeing Heathers and seeing this, where there's definitely they both are kind of taking the piss out of leftist stuff. As much as anything else, as much as I don't think Heathers conservatives
is particularly taking the piss out of leftism.
I was gonna say I don't think Demolition Man is either, but there definitely feels to be this tinge of again, where it's the art teacher, and it's a lot more about fake concern.
Yeah.
And that's what Demolition Man is too. And like Demolition Man is way more libertarian because it's about a future where like swearing is not allowed.
Demolition Man was exhausting.
Yeah. But I think it's
I felt like I was spending time with someone else's dad for way too long.
Yeah. But like, isn't that weird? Like it just feels like there's tinges of the same, like both movies are definitely trying to say something about society.
I mean, I think maybe I turned a blind eye because I would consider myself a leftist, but I also hate hippies. Like, you know what I mean?
Right. And that's the thing is like Demolition Man is also one where you watch and you're like, yeah, no, I agree. If this was the future, it would be bad.
If this was any sort of possibility, and maybe it was written like that. I don't know.
It's kind of it's a straw man argument, and I would argue there's a little of that in this movie too, but I don't think the movie's not aware of that. That's why I was saying this is like a dystopian film where it's exaggerated reality.
And I think that oddly enough, the straw man turned out to be a little more accurate than they intended.
Yes.
The fact that a trench coat wearing edgelord, bombs up a school is
yes. I would argue the way they treat adults in this is a little unfair to adults now being one, where it's I get it. I get what they're doing. Again, it makes a lot of sense.
I think it's specifically adults in the way that they treat children. I do think that's accurate. Yes.
And there's parts where Winona Ryder says that to them.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to be treated like a human being. Again, the adults sort of need to be like this because the whole point is that she's kind of trapped. There's no one for her to turn to.
Yeah.
And the adults are all just so...
They're so
like the
selfish.
one time she interacts with the counselor...
And when her mom says, when teenagers complain that they're not being treated like human beings, it's usually because they are being treated like human beings. And I think the adult world is very selfish.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a good depiction of adults from the perspective of kids.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it's exaggerated.
Yeah. I mean, I think society in general, especially, this Reagan era rich suburbia is very selfish.
Right.
So I don't...
They also...
Yeah.
Oh, I would say also the idea at the end is Christian Slater doesn't just blow up the school or tries to. He fakes a mass suicide note.
Yes.
And in the world of this movie... you believe that the adults would buy that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing is they have to make the adults so cartoonishly in their own bullshit.
Yeah.
That's a believable scheme. And it is by the end.
And it is. And watching it with modern eyes, again, you think, well, cops are lazy as fuck. They would, if they saw a suicide note, they would probably close the case despite protestations of the family.
Right, for sure.
I think.
Yeah, again, there's a lot of little things in this that's just like, I hate that that's more accurate than it thinks it is.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, the fact that the cop takes out the mineral water and is like, oh, damn, they were gay. They use a word that's not gay, but that's...
The way this movie, it feels a little ahead of its time with the way they're dealing with... It's not perfect, but they're basically playing off of people's stereotypes.
Yes.
Like the mineral water joke is obviously supposed to be over the top.
Yes.
Which is like, I'm going to plant evidence on these footballers. They point out that it's over the top. Yeah, I'm planting evidence that they're gay, so one of the things is mineral water. And then, the cop sees it and he's like, oh, they were gay.
Yeah. And the whole thing is, Winona Ryder pointed that out, being like, mineral water? Come on. A lot of people drink that.
Right. There's no representation of an actual gay character in this, which is why it's like, a little like I don't know if it needed it, but it's there's characters who depicted as being homophobic, and the whole point is that they're bad.
Yeah.
So never does it feel like it's punching down at gay people.
The language is dated, but it does feel like punching up at society.
Yeah, it's one of those things where the language is dated but accurate.
Yes,
they use a specific slur that they would in fact use, and I would argue some bullies would use today as well. So that's the feeling of it. Is like it never has like a stereotypical gay character, or it never like being gay is never like the idea that making the footballers gay. What made it interesting is that is the butt of the joke, but the butt of the joke isn't that they're gay. The butt of the joke is that the community then supports it. And that these two footballers who are deeply homophobic are being depicted that way. It's not perfect still.
Yeah.
Like, I would say.
And I think they needed to point out that, no, the community would not support this if they were alive.
Yes, and I'm glad they did. But I would say, yeah, that situation isn't perfect. It's kind of like when people revel that, like, people say anti-gay activists are secretly gay.
Yeah.
It's like, are you using that as an insult? Like, why does that, why it's weird that we're obsessed with that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's true. People project their own insecurities onto others, but you get so sick of it when it's like every single time someone levies that, and it's like, well, are you homophobic? Like, what are you
it starts
projecting?
becoming like a weapon.
Yeah. It's weird. Some people are just bigots.
Right, and you could argue that the movie is aware of that. Of like. Yeah, in the end, they're kind of doing the same thing that these bullies did.
Yeah. I mean, Christian Slater is a bully. It's very much the accurate archetype of a school shooter or a gamer gator or an incel, someone who thinks they are oppressed but is in fact oppressive.
Right. And they do a good job at explaining why he is that way. Because you look at his father. They explain that his mother killed herself by blowing herself up.
If he were alive today, he'd be a proud boy.
Yes, exactly. And no doubt about it. That's what makes it so good. Is but they show he moves around a lot. He's lonely. He's cynical. His dad is a bad person. His mom, the only person that he remembers caring about, is dead. He feels like the world oppressed him.
Yeah.
And it makes him he is a sad person.
Yeah.
But his decision, it's the idea is that Winona Ryder could be him.
Yes.
And that's the idea is
she has to be faced with him in order to decide that's not how she wants to be.
Right. With the initial idea, him pulling out a gun interests her.
Yeah.
And intrigues her.
Yeah.
And so her arc is almost going to the letting the negativity, letting the hypocrisy, letting it turn her into a villain. In the end, the moral of the movie is basically kindness. Kindness is it.
Yeah.
That's the only way to fight back. Or the biggest way or the best way,
Yeah.
Good movie.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the way that they treated Winona Ryder as a privileged straight white girl who has to literally be faced with the implications of what she's okay with, I think that's pretty accurate. That's an arc that a lot of people go through.
Yeah, I could believe that. It's it's wild that I didn't see this until I was older, but I'm kind of glad too.
Yeah, I think that you notice different things watching this as an adult.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to watch Pump Up the Volume with you. That's a movie I haven't seen since I was a teenager, so it might be really embarrassing now. But
we'll find out. I mean, I was embarrassed when I watched this again, but I also loved it more.
Yeah. Oh, this is great. I think this era of movies, again, Hudson Hawk, same writer, and Christian Slater with even Kuffs. I'm even going to throw Kuffs in this. Is that they took
Kuffs?
Well, big swings. I would say this is a lot of big swings.
Definitely
and
big
most
swings.
of them. Yeah, and you look back at some of these and you're like, what the fuck were they thinking?
Yeah.
And then you look at this one and you're like, oh, okay. It kind of takes the right combination of the right director. Because this felt like, again, John Waters. I would even say it has a little Lynch in it.
Mm-hmm.
The first scene we didn't even talk about feels like it's a dream, but never explicitly says it.
Yes.
Which is it's the Heathers playing croquet, and then one of them hits the ball, and you see that Winona Ryder is buried up to her neck, and the ball hits her in the head. And then the credits start, and they never say if that's real or not.
Yeah.
And you don't really need to know. Like, that style of filmmaking.
That could have been a hazing initiation in order for her to be part of the group, or that could have been a dream. We don't need to know. Doesn't matter.
I love that style. Like, when shit used to be, like, a little more off the wall.
Me
and,
too.
Like, unapologetically so.
Me too. I love it so much. I love a movie that you can watch again and experience differently.
Yeah, that is also good.
And you notice different things, even a TV show, even small things like set design, like just tiny little things that people care enough to put in little bits of dialogue or little things in their movie that are not necessarily noticed upon first watch.
Oh yeah, I love it when a movie is handled with care.
Yeah.
With great care. Yeah, and this feels like one. This feels like I don't think this is underrated anymore. I feel like this is a classic.
Yeah, this has definitely become a classic. I don't know how well it did at first.
Yeah, I didn't look it up.
Yeah. I mean, that's fine. We know it's aged extremely well, so we know how it's perceived now.
Mm-hmm. And that's what matters. And then we love Christian Slater.
Well, he's
the best.
I was just stunned that you didn't see the one movie where his shtick works, because that's like acting like an old man when you're a kid is such an edgelord thing. I believe you. I haven't seen it.
I knew high school. I knew the kids who had like a pipe.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on, dude.
Oh, yeah. For us, it was clove cigarettes. That was the thing. Ugh.
Oh, I legitimately enjoy clove cigarettes, or I did at the time.
Yeah, it was very much an Igby goes down high school.
Oh yeah, I never smoked cloves, like only cloves, but cloves is how you begin smoking cigarettes. I don't know. That was the first cigarette I ever had, was a clove cigarette, and they're sweet. They're sweet on your lips.
Yeah,
and that gets you into trash cigarettes.
Yes,
and next thing you know, you're ordering cigarettes from Ukraine because they're cheaper.
And that's the arc, because that's how you get cigarettes when you're under 18 anyway, is they're trash. Well, either that or you have someone who looks 18 buy them for you.
Right. But yeah, I think the reason why, clove cigarettes specifically is because you get them from adult edgelords who are willing to give teen edgelords cigarettes.
Yes.
And they only smoke cloves.
Yes. American Spirits was also a big one.
Yep.
Because a lot of adult edgelords are food handlers.
Yeah. Lucky Strike was like more of the punk rock era. Like punk rock, we adapted a lot of old like vet stuff, like PBR or Black Label Beer and Lucky Strikes. Like that was tended to be like the trash punk stuff.
I don't think you can find those here anymore. I think that might be why.
My cigarette of choice, because it was based off of finances, was, I believe they're called Mustangs. You got them at Cumberland Farms, Cumbies in the East Coast. You guys don't have Cumbies here. If you smoked them long enough, your tongue would turn black. They tasted like an old campfire. I loved them so much.
Yep.
Or rather, I love thinking about them. I don't think I actually enjoyed them.
I don't think I actually enjoyed them either. I was a basic camel bitch because I had Graves' disease and looked much younger.
I like camels.
I looked so much younger than I did that just being seen smoking a cigarette was enough.
When I was smoking, when I could afford it, it would be Camels. Camel Lights usually. Weirdly enough, Marlboro was like, that was like high school football cigarettes where I'm just like, oh, that's the popular.
No, that's still
the right wing shitty popular cowboy cigarettes.
I went to a lefty high school, and I remember there was a store where if you looked like there was like a store where you'd get your like lunch and stuff that was like kind of around the corner from the school where juniors and seniors had off-campus privileges, and if you looked like a senior, they would just sell you cigarettes. And they never had Marlboros in stock because they knew it was a lefty high school, and we didn't want to buy something with a cowboy on the box.
Right. It's really funny because in the end, it's a bunch of huge corporations.
Yeah, it didn't matter. It really doesn't matter. I think, man.
I used to smoke. This is some real edgelord, not edgelord, but I used to smoke, I think they're called de Mauriers. They're French-Canadian cigarettes. Up in French Canada, I would say their cigarettes were better, but you'd only get them at like fancy places.
You had access to so much Canadian stuff that I just, Southern California, I had access to the Mexican sodas that are far superior to the American versions of those sodas, but cigarettes, not so much.
The grand edgelord of them all is Dunhill cigarettes. That is the brand Hunter S. Thompson smoked. And so you'd smoke them if you're a little edgelord, wanted to be like a writer. That was, Sorry. Yeah, you would have loved Canadian cigarettes. The warning labels in Canada they take up half of the cigarette, and they're like grotesque pictures of dead babies and stuff. And people they were like trading cards up there.
Or like a rotted lungs and shit. I've seen those boxes, yeah.
There were like rare ones that people were like proud to get, stuff like that.
High schoolers are so fucking stupid.
Oh, God, yeah. They really are.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, all right. Well, I feel like we have nothing else to say. Do you have any other things to say about Heathers before we wrap this up? Is that a no?
I'm sure I'll think of it as soon as we wrap this up, but at the moment, nothing's coming to me.
Okay, that's fair. Anything else to say about cigarettes?
My dad found a pack in my purse when I was 16, and I had already been diagnosed with osteoporosis because Graves' disease, and he cried. And I didn't pick up another cigarette until college, and I socially smoked for a while, but that was it.
Yeah, I was a weekend smoker a little bit. I smoked for a while, and what did it? I hate to say this, but it worked. Massachusetts and their terrible cigarette tax laws did it. So they basically like hammered down on cigarettes in Massachusetts before anything else, added insane taxes to it. And so I had to roll my own for a while, and then they taxed that. So we started buying Ukrainian cigarettes that would come here in these like brown packages, and they tasted awful. And at that point, it was like, okay, why am I doing this?
Right.
What's the point of this? Like, yeah, I could drive up to New Hampshire because New Hampshire is the Texas of New England. And so they had like tax-free cigarettes. But
to do that for an errand, that sounds like, oh my God.
Yeah, unless you're right on the border. So it became this thing where I was in my 20s, and it was like, I'm not getting enough pleasure from this for it to be worth it.
Yeah.
I might as well. You know what would solve this problem is quitting smoking. Yeah.
I don't think people should be forced into that choice, but
but it worked.
I understand why that would work. And I think the labels are the label thing is smarter. It's better. It's just more, I'm giving you the information, you decide.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I don't know, man.
I don't know either.
I don't want us to get into a nanny state future where we have to live in the underground with Dennis Leary and Jack Black, and they give out tickets
I think
for
those
swearing.
labels can be more nuanced, like talk about how the DuPont Corporation poisoned a bunch of people. Talk about who you're supporting, but obviously they can't do that.
Yeah. You know where the real coolness is now? Vaping. You got to vape like you're from the future.
We did get into a vaping cycle during quarantine because we had
like
nothing
we're from
to do.
The future.
Yeah. We looked like real douchebags inside our home.
Inside the comfort of our home.
Yeah.
Where the man couldn't come and regulate us. That's the point of all of this. The point of all of this is that regulations are bad, and we don't want a Demolition Man future. So vote for Ron Paul.
I'm
is
honestly
he a libertarian?
I think so. I'm honestly very I can't stand libertarians. I agree with them about drugs.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to talk about libertarians.
We don't. We really don't. I
That's
think,
a whole other podcast.
Yeah, I think their economic policies are trash. When it comes to drugs, yeah, social issue. Treat it like a social problem.
Mm-hmm. Because drugs are cool. All right.
Yeah.
Hana, do you want to plug anything else at the end of this?
I would say we should make a Twitter and TikTok and Instagram for our cats specifically, but we haven't done that yet.
Okay.
So
we'll do that.
Okay. When is this coming out?
Like
in January.
Early
January. Okay, so my Etsy shop is back open. That's Cat Butt Boutique. It's not spelled like a pun. It's just Cat Butt Boutique, like butt, like a butt.
Like anus.
Like anus.
The anus.
Yes. I was inspired by kitten. And it's got a bunch of cool trinkets and fun stuff and Garftopuses, which will probably be cheaper once it's open because I've been able to have an easier time printing them, which is Garfield octopuses. I've been 3D printing them. So yeah, check it out.
And I'll plug the Patreon. This is on Gamefully Unemployed, which we have a Patreon. Patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed, GAMEFULOY, unemployed. For just $5 a month, you get access to a bunch of podcasts exclusive on there, such as Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and Spiel Boys. For a little more, we watch movies every Friday night with our patrons. And then there's just a bunch of tiers you can check out. So do that. You can go to gamefullyunemployed.com and check out a link to our merch store. We have some really cool shirts on there, so you should look. And I don't know. You can follow us Gamefully Un. We're on Twitter.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your important plug, but if you are, say, talking to a cishet man or a younger person, show them this movie because they probably haven't seen it, and it's worth everyone's time.
Yeah, definitely watch Heathers. I feel like that's a good Watch Heathers and Kuffs.
You're gonna throw Kuffs in there?
Let's throw in Kuffs. Everybody, check out Kuffs. This has been Kuffscast. Signing off.
How do you watch Kuffs before Heathers?
Kuffs.